Bellingwood Vignettes by Diane Greenwood Muir. Book 12, Vignette number 1, Teen Angel. Jason swore as books tumbled from his arms to the floor. He looked up in time to see a girl with long, wavy blonde hair saunter past as if nothing had happened. Of course it was her. The one girl he'd wanted to notice him, and she didn't even pay attention to the fact that she'd bumped his arm and created chaos. He bent over to retrieve the books, grateful his tablet wasn't part of the stack. He'd just gotten it and hadn't invested in a case, even though his mom told him he couldn't carry it to school until it was safe. Why was she always right? Just once he'd like to be able to make his own decision, right or wrong, and not have his mother's voice in his head telling him what to do. "Can I help?" Jason stood back up and smiled at the girl who had stopped. Mel was great. She was in most of his classes, but she sang in the choir and played in band. Scar called her a music geek, and he guessed she really was. Everything about her screamed musician. She wore t-shirts with composers on them, carried a music bag with notes and stuff on it, and as Jason looked more closely, those were musical symbols on her earrings. But she was really smart, too. In geometry, she always got an A on her papers and tests. Most of the time, he did too. But when it came to math, she beat everybody. "Jason?" she asked, rapping his shoulder. "Are you in there?" He scowled. "Sorry." "I saw her bump you and then move on like you didn't even exist." Mel put her hand behind her head and posed. "My name is Linda Sinclair, and I'm more important than anyone in this school." Jason grinned. "But I'm surprised she did that to you," Mel said. "She usually flirts with anyone of the male persuasion and ignores any girl who isn't in her clique." "I must not be good enough to flirt with," Jason said. "We better get to class. The bell's going to ring." "Did you get your paper written?" Mel asked. He tapped the notebook. "Finished it last night. You?" "I emailed it in yesterday." They walked into the classroom, and Mel strode across the room to her seat. Jason went to his and sat down. Linda Sinclair was ahead of him 2 rows. Why wouldn't she flirt with him? What was his problem? He tried to think if he'd done anything to tick her off, but they'd never met outside of world history. This was the only class they shared. Maybe he just wasn't worth it. Then he had a thought. What if he smelled like horses, and that offended her? He sniffed his forearm, but didn't smell anything bad. Maybe he wouldn't smell it, though, since he was so used to it. But Mel would have told him she didn't care what anybody thought. The petite brunette sitting next to Linda was Ariel Braxton. Maybe he'd just ask her. She was from Bellingwood and rode the bus sometimes. If she was by herself, she'd sit with him and make small talk. She was kind of dingy. His mom said those kinds of girls were all fluff and no substance. Ariel was nice enough if Linda or her other friends weren't around. Jason had watched her work hard to get in with that clique. She changed her hairstyle, and over the last year spent a lot of money on new clothes. At the beginning of the school year, she'd shown him her braces. They were invisible. If girls didn't think boys noticed when they did stupid stuff like that, they were dead wrong. Nobody cared about Ariel. The only attention she got now was because she was friends with Linda. She hadn't been that bad in junior high. Nice enough girl and kind of pretty. But now, she was just another face in the crowd. He barely paid attention through class. This one was the worst. The teacher had obviously written out lesson plans 25 years ago and still used the same old lectures. And it was the last class of the day. Who was she kidding? Nobody paid attention. Jason's mind wandered, and soon he was thinking about the costume he was wearing for Halloween. They were doing something different this year. Polly was riding Demi as the Grim Reaper, and he was dressing up as a zombie with manacles and chains. It was better than the years he ended up draped over a horse as a dead body. At least this year he'd be able to sit up straight. "Mr. Donovan?" Jason looked up at Mrs. Cooley. "Your paper, please." "Oh, yeah, right here." He fumbled around, sorting through the folder until he found it and handed it to her. She moved on, and he glanced at Linda. She'd watched the whole thing, and then turned to Ariel to giggle and whisper. Great. Now was when she finally paid attention to him. Mel caught his glance and rolled her eyes. "Email it next time," she mouthed. He nodded in agreement. The bell rang, and he waited until Ariel and Linda left the room before leaving his seat. When he got to the hall, he found Scar and Kent waiting for him. "Come on," Scar said. "Mom's waiting." "I gotta get to my locker first," Jason replied. "I'll meet you out front in 3 minutes. Time me." He took off at a slow trot, dodging his way around people trying to get out of the school. At his locker, he filled his backpack with books and slid the tablet into the protected pocket. Yeah, he needed to get a cover this weekend. He couldn't wait until he could drive. Asking for rides was getting old. But Eliseo said something about going over to Ames to pick up feed or medicine from the vet school at Iowa State, so maybe they could just make a side trip. He grinned. If Mr. Bedford went with them, there'd be a bunch of side trips. That old man liked to shop. Jason headed for the front door and gave a quick shiver at the cold air. His mom was going to make him wear a coat tomorrow, he could just tell. Nobody but the wimps were wearing them yet, but it was getting colder. Oh well. He jogged to Scar's mother's van and slid the back door open, climbing in beside Kent. "Thanks for picking us up today, Mrs. Vasquez." She gave him a warm smile. "It's no problem. I had errands that needed to be done, so it only seemed fair that you boys didn't have to ride the bus. This will give you more time to finish your work with the horses, no? And that means more time to do your homework." Scar moaned. "No, I don't need more time to do my homework, Mom. You are a smart boy, and your father and I want you to go to college, so you will do all of your homework. Twice, if necessary." Kent and Jason laughed at their friend. This was an old argument. "Did you hear Linda Sinclair and Cameron Duncan were going together?" Kent said. Jason's heart dropped. "She's dating Duncan? Since when?" Oscar turned his head. "After last week's football game. The way I heard it, she told Sean that if he didn't ask her, she was moving on." He swished his hands like waves. "Well, it won't last," Jason grumped. Kent punched his arm. "Why do you care? Do you have a thing for her?" "No," Jason said. "Why would you say that?" "Because you're always staring at her," Scar said. "You should just give up. Linda Sinclair will never have anything to do with the likes of you." His tone grew mocking. "You're from Bellingwood." "I know," Jason said, "but Duncan is a He broke off before finishing the word. Kent interrupted. "And she's a bitch." "Boys," Mrs. Vasquez scolded. "Be nice." "Well, she is, Mom. One of the worst." His mother laughed. "Ha! And they say girls are gossips. You boys are much worse." She stopped at the stop sign and turned toward Bellingwood. "You will all find nice girls someday. If not in high school, then in college. You shouldn't worry about it now." "But we should be practicing, like dating and stuff. Girls don't even know we're alive, Mom." "It's best that way," she said. "Keeps you out of trouble. Make friends with the nice girls, and when you all grow up, you'll figure out which of them you want to be with. Girls like Linda Sinclair aren't worth your time. Trust me." Scar gave his friends a huge eye roll. "Yes, Mom." "That's my good boy," she said, and drove into the driveway at Sycamore House. Jason slid the door open. "Thanks for the ride." "Yeah, thanks a lot," Kent said, and stepped out behind Jason. The door slid closed, but not before they heard her say to her son, "You're too smart to worry about silly girls, Oscar, but I will always love you." The side door slammed shut. Scar opened the front passenger door and got out, his face red. He slammed his door closed and said, "You heard that?" "She loves you," Jason said, grinning. Scar swatted him. "Shut up."